How's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today I'm going to be doing some quick guides for some Mythic Plus and some Mythic DPS single target. You guys know the drill. Also, I'm going to be doing a quick update as to, what I've been doing lately, because I did come back to the game after getting my best in slot legendaries. I started hitting Mythic Plus, I started hitting some Mythic rating. Haven't touched PvP too much since then, but I have a feeling I'll get back into it. Quite a bit more in the near future. So let's go ahead and get into this guide and talk about what I've been doing and rotation and stats and stuff like that. So let's do this. So let's jump into a quick little update of what's been going on in the game and what I've been doing, and to kind of come up with this guide, make sure I have everything correctly with the rotation, everything like that. I've been rating Mythic again for about the past 3 weeks. I've got a pretty good eye level upgrade. I'm up to about 962 at this point if I put on, my highest eye level gear. But obviously my best build's going to be at 954 based on the items that I got. So what I'm basing my rotation off, stuff I'm doing, things like that, is I've been hitting 100% parses on the single target fights. And yesterday I managed to hit 100% parse that ranked number 28 in the world for my item level. So I figured at that point I have enough sufficient evidence to go ahead and make the single target slash Mythic Plus video for you guys. I also pushed up my Mythic Plus score in that past time to above 2K, so like 15 plus in all dungeons works good. I think the highest dungeon I've done so far is like a 20, which at my item level is still pretty painful. Anything above, I'd say 18, 19, it starts being painful at 954 item level. Definitely need to raise up my stamina and my survivability for that. But let's go ahead and get into legendaries first. Alright, so what you see me having here is, of course, the legendary belt, newfound will, and the bracers, which these are going to be your best single target DPS legendaries. And these ones will also apply for Mythic Plus if you're doing I think it's raging that causes ads to enrage at like 30%, and of course, I believe bursting when you have to apply a lot of single target and a lot less AOE, so you cannot get insane amount of stacks. But generally, this is going to be what you're rocking when it comes to raid DPS, besides two fights, which I'll talk about a little later. Obviously, because this is going to increase your single target damage, it increases obliterate damage and has a 15% chance to refund one rune, elongating out your rotation and making the most spammable ability you have. Deal more damage and proc, and since we'll be rocking obliteration with that, it'll increase the crit chance of it by 100% if you're rotating and getting the correct procs. So that's something we'll need. Obviously, the bracers. The bracers are just like a pure need for Frost Death Knights, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't matter what combination of legendaries you're running, you pretty much want the bracers for almost any build. I have seen some people get away with not using it with certain builds, but I almost feel like those people may have just gotten fairly lucky, and they used their knowledge to exploit dampening the meters a little higher than if they. I feel like if they would have used the bracers, they could have gotten even higher than they did if they would have done the same thing that they did then. It seems to be with what the leaderboards are saying about the bracers. Now, what we got going on, obviously, is just a simple single target rotation. We'll get into rotation a bit. Um, Now, the other thing I need to talk about is what do I mean when I'm saying that there's only two boss fights where you don't use this combination. It's fairly simple. All you need to do is switch out your belt, and this is going to sound absolutely crazy if you're not raiding right now, but you got to put on Sifu's, and this is going to be for like high command and Eleanor, one of those two. It's got to be one of those two. Yeah, we're already messing up words and names. We're back to the normal. All right, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and pop on Sifu's here, which is going to give us an insane amount of haste increase and just an insane amount of damage overall when it comes to base DPSing, ads, things like that. Because on High Council, things like that, not High Council, High Command, you're going to have to interrupt the Pyroblast. When you interrupt the Pyroblast, it's going to give you an insane amount of proccage on that, which is going to increase your DPS tenfold. And if you're running Frost Scythe build with those 3 adds, especially if you're doing Mythic, it's just going to be an insane amount of DPS. You're going to be able to keep your consistency up overall. I have seen some people running like Battle Lord, I believe it was. It was no Death Lord, and doing quite a bit of DPS on Eonor. I think it was top in the charts, so that was cool seeing that build up there. I do know that this ring, based with the bracers, it will give you the highest consistency out of any build when it comes to AoE. So logically, that does fit the bill. I was surprised I didn't see that up there to begin with, to tell you the truth. Um, Early on. Now, I'm kind of sad that the breath specs haven't been holding up lately. The consistency specs have definitely taken over when it comes to the single target rotation. Because I saw a little bit of hope on some of the fights when it came to breath. Some of the guys were fighting for it, and they were getting up there, but inevitably, I believe the Frost Scythe Cleave is going to be taking the AoE situations, at least when done correctly. So let's go ahead and talk about specking here and why we're spec'd the way we are. Because I see a lot of Frost DKs when they're not geared enough or not with the correct build using shattering strikes. Now, if you do not have the force set for your Death Knight, obviously you do not want to be using Shattering Strikes, because that increases Howling Blast and Obliterate damage by 15%. Without Shattering Strikes, you're not going to be having the rotation where you basically go Obliterate, Howling Blast, Obliterate, Howling Blast, for the most part staggering a Frost Strike to absorb the 5 stacks and then going back to the Obliterate Frost Strike. Because a lot of the times, Frost Strike with this build and with this 4 set is mainly just a filler. For the most part, and then later on in the rotation, further down the line, let's say after the first burst, after the second burst, when you're a little bit more rune starved, you start using Frost Strike more often, obviously. But yeah, definite build, we're going to be going with Shattering Strikes unless you don't have the force set, and then you want to be using Runic Attune, which still works pretty well. It really does. As for the level 57 talent, you're going to be using Murderous Efficiency. That's for the consistency, obviously. That's why we're using the belt in single target DPS. We're going to be rocking Ice Cap number 58 for the reduced remaining cooldown on Pillar of Frost, because we are going to need that increased single target for reducing cooldown. Number 60. Yeah, pretty much Winter is Coming is a nice little stun, obviously, for rating, but for Mythic Pluses, that's what you're going to be running. I don't necessarily look towards either of these for Mythic Pluses. I guess Blinding Sleet could help for an extra interrupt when you're doing Mythic Pluses. That would be nice. As for the level 75 talents, Inexorable Assault's going to give you the most DPS out of these talents when it comes to PvE. Volatile Shield's going to give you more defense when you have to absorb a lot of damage, like High Council, not High Council. Why am I getting that wrong every time? Anyways, it's going to give you more defense when the laser blasts down on you. Let's say for some reason somebody didn't put a pod down, bat kick somebody out of the pod. That's going to absorb a lot of the base DPS or the base damage that's going to be bursting on you during that fight. Can also be used in Mythic Pluses for like Blackrook Hold, the first boss in there. If your group doesn't end up killing all the ghosts, or something along those lines, or it's a higher level Mythic Plus, you may actually need Volatile Shielding to absorb the extra damage coming in on you. As for the level 90 talent, now if you are using Sifus, now here's the thing, with AoE and mob DPS, Sifus is going to be the ring you want to go. Combination with Frost Scythe. Now with Mythic Plus, it's teaming this week, so AoE is definitely going to be what you want to run. So for the most part, you'd be running Sifus with Frost Scythe during the Mythic Plus, and you could go ahead and use buttons like gear buttons, kind of like this, and easily switch between the two when you need to deal either trash DPS or boss single target DPS, which will really help your overall, since if you're using Sifus on a single target and you don't have anything to interrupt, it'll really hurt your DPS. As for the single target DPS, loss of using Frost Scythe really isn't terrible, and if there is multiple adds on the boss, it will actually help you keep up your consistency rather than hurt it, because not taking Gathering Storms does hurt your opening burst quite a bit when it comes to the single target burst. As for the level 100 talent, I would suggest using Obliteration for both Mythic Plus and single target builds, just because it's going to give you a great amount of consistency, and it's also going to help your initial burst by quite a bit, since it allows you to do the rotation you want, unless you got to throw in a frost strike to grant you a proc of obliterate, which your procs have probably already messed up that point, and your chance of hitting 100% parse or something like that is definitely gone a little bit down the drain. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into some rotation stuff. Also, if you have any questions about talents or other legendary builds that you want me to check out, or you yourself don't have these correct legendaries to use in these situations, and you want to know which ones to use, you can go ahead and ask those questions down below. So let's go ahead and jump into some rotation. So let's go over the single target DPS if you're using the belt and the bracers. It's a fairly simple thing to do. Now, first of all, if you're doing any kind of mythic raiding or heroic raiding, you'll probably want to pre-pot. Now, you always want to use your pre-pot around 2 seconds when they're going to pull the boss. Reason being is because once you start DPSing the boss, as long as you used your potion before you engage the fight, you'll be able to pop a second potion later on in the fight, which will have a huge increase on your consistent DPS, because 2,500 strength, increase all stats, but mainly strength, the one we want, for 1 minute. Of course, if you're using 2, it elongates to 2 minutes, becomes a very big increase in your DPS. A very big secret to doing that. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to pop a simple burst macro. It's a macro I've honestly been using since the beginning of time on my Frosty. Okay, we've changed it a little bit. We got Pillar of Frost running. I don't need the slash use in there. Show tooltip, Pillar of Frost, use Blood Fury, which is my racial, and of course Remorseless Winter in there, so we can pop those both at the same time and start dropping obliterates. Now, this rotation for single target is fairly simple. After the little burst part, because you're going to start slapping on your obliterates. Now, we're going to quickly talk about something as to what style of an opener that I'm doing. This is more the style that you're going to get 100% parses, and some openers you're going to kind of go lower in DPS. It's not going to be as safe as a DPS as waiting to burst when you end up proccing Fallen Crusader, because the reason being, if you don't burst right away, you're not getting the cooldown reduction on your Pillar of Frost and things like that immediately. And if you're going to hit 100% parse, that means do 100% of the possible damage for your item level. You're not going to be able to hit that unless you're bursting right away, and you of course get the correct procs, because without the correct procs, it's not going to work, because the simulation is ran for everything to be perfect, and if it's ran against a simulation of any kind, obviously it's going to be lower than 100% if there's a possibility of it occurring. So you will see higher highs, but sometimes lower lows if things don't proc correctly. And hopefully we get things to proc correctly. We see our little strength buff proc up here. We see our trinket proc up, and from there we'll know at that point that the burst was good. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-pot here. I'm going to run into the target, go ahead and use my cooldown macro to make sure my Remorseless Winter procs at the same time that the obliterate hits. It'll be perfect. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this. We'll pre-pot 3, 2, 1, and then boom, right in with that. And really soon I'm going to go right into the obliteration, because right after that we want to get as many procs on that as we can. Now, if you don't have a Howling Blast proc from your obliterate, go ahead and use a Frost Strike in there to grant that crit. Now, right now we've hit kind of a dead zone. Now, I'm not explaining when to use Syndragos' Fury. We've hit kind of a dead zone where I'm only able to spam Frost Strikes and Obliterates. It's around this time that you're going to want to reapply that, and you're going to want to pop your Empowered Rune Weapon to elongate out your DPS. Now, kind of your priority is to spam obliterates roughly at all times. Really, the only tricky part to the rotation is getting the correct procs on the opener. Now, I haven't bursted with my dragon or anything like that. I haven't rebursted. When reburst comes back up, try to time your Remorseless Winter with burst, obviously, if you can, and then start dropping obliterates and hammering on those Howling Blast Frost Strikes. Now, you see, I'm not having any problems keeping up with the runes, even though I'm spamming my Obliterate. If you get the correct procs, you really don't have to use too many Frost Strikes. And for the most part, your DPS will be better as long as you stay away from using Frost Strikes unless it's just either for a filler or you can't use your Obliterates to get yourself some Howling Blast procs. Now, as you see here, my Potion of Prolonged Power is back up. I could reproc that if I wanted to. I could do quite a few things with that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let off this boss. Now, you see, I'm doing 2 million consistency, even though I wasn't focusing on my DPS or using my dragon. For that matter. So if you're keeping up 2 mil consistency, you can progress through Mythic completely in the raid. Obviously, if it's higher, it'll be a lot easier, but that's kind of the minimum you want for DPS. And obviously, you can kill a lot of the bosses at much lower DPS than everyone in the group dealing to 2 million DPS. All right, so the one thing I didn't show you was when to proc Dragon when it comes to the single target DPS. Now, the thing we want to do with Dragon is we're going to, pop Potion, pop our Burst, but the thing you don't want to proc, you don't want to use Dragon until Rune of Fallen Crusader procs. Now, this is the one thing that can really destroy or make your parse or your DPS when it comes to bosses, is when you throw out said Dragon. Because if you don't have that extra, I think it's 15% strength, I can't remember if they buffed it or not, they might have, but if you don't have that extra strength proc, it's not going to scale with the attack power correctly, and it's going to really, make your single target fall through the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and quick burst and show you when to use your dragon. Obviously, you're going to pre-pot. I'm not going to use my pre-pot, and I'm going to make it a little quicker burst than what I did last time. I'm going to make it a little more flush than I did last time. I tried to slow it down a little bit, and kind of made my DPS or my opening burst kind of candy wampus. We'll try to clean it up a little bit this time. Yeah, heck, I'll use my potion. Why not? I don't have empowered rune weapon to proc, but we did explain when to use that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pot, coming in, slamming my face on this. Perfect Howling Blast proc. I've already got my thing up. Boom, dragon. And I've already hit 4 million plus DPS. We're seeing we're procking up above 4 million again. We're going ham on this damage. We're going ham. And this is how, you hit 100% parses. This right here, with how quick that opener was, would have really been a perfect opener for my Frost DK. This would have been great. This would have been great for any single target, anything without mechanics, things like that. This would have been an amazing parse on a boss when it's that quick coming up. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some AoE Mythic Plus and some boss DPS stuff using Sifus and Frost Scythe. Let's go over that Mythic Plus AoE and single target for the little Frost Scythe cleave spec going on here. And of course I'm going to be using Sifus for this because it's really this ring has become so strong in the AoE category for just about any class when it comes to Mythic Plus or top end Mythic Plus dungeon people. So we got, let's see here, we got our Frost Scythe rolling, we got our multiple ads in front of us here. I was taking a look at a couple of the things, whether or not I was going to explain them, but I'll save those until a little later. So let's go ahead and burst on 3 targets. Now, of course, if you're doing a Mythic Plus dungeon and it's a higher level, more than likely you should have enough time to use Sindragos's Fury at the beginning of the pull or the beginning of the dungeon. To AoE the first set of ads, but you got to use it pretty quickly because you only got, you got a 5-minute cooldown time. If you make it to the first boss before the 5 minutes, it's going to really reduce that single target DPS you're going to be able to deal to him. But overall, when it comes to Mythic Pluses, I'd say your total damage is a lot more important than just trying to bring up your single target boss damage, unless the Mythic Plus is like tyrannical, and in which case you're going to want to go a lot more single target and save some of your burst or a lot of your burst for the bosses because they're going to last a long time. They've got a lot of health, and it's probably going to be roughly the hardest part of the dungeon for you. Alright, so opening up on these ads, I'll go ahead and pop Dragon 2, it'll be fun. Not going to pop Prolonged Potion of Power, obviously. I'm going to save those for the bosses. I'm going to go ahead and open up on this target. We'll use Obliteration, hopefully within the first couple attacks when we get our first Howling Blast proc, because that's going to start procking our guaranteed Frost Scythe crits. I mean, we could use it early and use a Howling Blast for a guaranteed crit for Frost Strike starting off, but that can actually lower your DPS a lot, and unless you just want to kind of Hail Mary it and go for the crits, it works a lot better. You get a lot more DPS out of it that way than you would taking the consistency road, obviously. Kind of like that little PvE variation over there. So I'm going to go ahead and open up on these two targets, obviously popping that simple burst macro we were talking about before, and I'm going to go directly into Frost Scything until I proc a Howling Blast proc. When would I proc my dragon? Same rule as PvE, don't use it until you get your Fallen Crusader proc, otherwise it's not going to hit nearly as hard as it would. So I'm going to run up on these ads, boom, got that off. Did not get a Howling Blast proc, no Howling Blast proc, got one right there. We're going to throw up that cooldown, start throwing those up. We got up our Strength proc, there goes Dragon, just keep spamming this Frost Scythe until you get another Howling Blast proc. We can't use it there, so we're going to go ahead and use a Frost Strike when that's down, and then Howling Blast proc when it's up, and then go back at it like this. And this is how you just kind of keep up your AoE rotation. Now, if these were normal Mythic Plus ads, we would have gotten a stun in there with Sifu's Secret, which would have probably increased our DPS by another 2 to 3 million, which we would have hit probably around 10k DPS on that first pull. And then with this spec, you can keep up, I'd say, about 4 million DPS over time with this spec if you're doing it correctly. Maybe more, probably about 3 million if you're not bursting that often or you're just cleaving on ads. 3 targets, obviously. 2 targets with burst, you can hit above 3 million, probably 3.5 to 4 million if you get the right procs. And if there's a single ad, you usually don't want to use Frost Scythe unless you have a guaranteed crit, and let's say you only have a single rune up. Otherwise, I definitely don't use it too often when it comes to this single target DPS. But if you're like DPSing on a boss with it where you have to go into your single target rotation and not use Frost Scythe, just follow the same rule I just told you there. Don't use it unless there's obviously a single target or 1 rune up and 1 crit. Otherwise, your obliterate's going to be a lot better way to go. Like right there, I just had 1 downtime on a single rune with a guaranteed crit. I hit that. I procced a Howling Blast, which was a big increase on my DPS overall than compared to hitting waiting for that full rune to proc around the circle and getting a Howling Blast proc. So it's kind of a gamble there also which way you go on that. So as you can see, for parsing on a DK at 100%, it's quite a gamble, but as long as you are getting a 100% of uptime on the boss and you're doing your rotation correctly, I personally don't think it's too difficult to get 100% parses on, like single target bosses such as Garathi. I find it fairly not consistency, a fairly well consistency if I want to put that weird, but consistently able to pull off 100% parses on it as long as you're doing your rotation correctly. Obviously, if your strength your Rune of Fallen Crusader doesn't proc immediately or near the immediate start, so you can get your dragon off. That'll actually lower it, so you probably won't hit 100%. You may drop down to 90%, maybe 95% if you make a couple mistakes, something along those lines. But I hope you guys enjoyed this little update on Frost DK PvE, PvP Mythic Plus is what I've got going on, what I'm doing. Let me know if you have any questions about gear. The build I'm running right now, I've got Arcano Crystal. I'll upgrade that as soon as I get I was looking for like an upgraded Shadow Singed Fang or something like that, but I got an LFR one which has a socket, which makes it fairly good. I'm hoping to get either like a Mythic one or a Heroic one soon, but really had no luck on that. And probably ending up using the well-known basic build. Hopefully, yeah, getting Kaz and rocking the Singed Fang seems like a really strong build, because this trinket alone increased my DPS by, I'd say, like 200,000, maybe 300,000, just switching out a different trinket for that one. It was a really big effect, and obviously the stat stick's pretty strong, and that's the only reason I'm rocking it at 880. I'm not trying to like lower my gear to like scale my parse or something like that, but it literally just messes up my build if I equipped anything higher than that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little update video of what I've got going on. And until next time, guys, leave a like, comment if you got a question. This was your boy Hazzed.